The vibration of my cell phone against the granite kitchen island cut through the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The digital clock on the microwave read exactly 7 in the morning. When your phone rings at that hour and the caller ID displays the corporate routing number for First Meridian Bank, you do not let it go to voicemail. I slid my thumb across the screen. This is Sloan. Sloan, it is David Sterling, branch director at the downtown office. His voice was stripped of the usual polished banking pleasantries we exchanged during my portfolio reviews. It sounded tight, filtered through a layer of institutional panic. I know it is before business hours, but I need you to confirm you are in a secure location. I need you to sit down. I did not sit. I reached over and turned off the coffee grinder. I am standing, David, I said, my voice perfectly level. Tell me what is on your screen. I heard the heavy click of a mechanical mouse over the receiver. Our automated fraud division initiated a hard lock on your profile at 3 o'clock this morning, he said, speaking quickly. Sloan, there is exactly $100,000 in credit card debt registered under your Social Security number. The account was opened 22 days ago, fast-tracked to a signature tier, and completely maxed out over the weekend through a series of luxury retail transactions and high-yield vendor deposits. The morning light filtering through my kitchen window suddenly seemed too sharp. I did not drop the phone. I did not ask him how the universe could allow this to happen. I bypassed the emotional shock and went straight to the logistics. My credit files at Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion have been frozen for 4 years, I stated cleanly. I have not submitted a lending application since I bought my house. I know, David replied, dropping his voice almost to a whisper. That is why I am calling you directly instead of letting this route to the fraud queue. The application bypassed the hard inquiry suppression because the applicant submitted an internal verification override based on your flawless history with us. And Sloan, the individuals who utilize that card are standing in my lobby right now demanding that I lift the security freeze so they can push through one final wire transfer. My fingers tightened around the edge of the granite counter. Who exactly is in your lobby? A man and 2 women, he said. They are holding authorized user cards linked to your master profile. They identified themselves as your parents and your younger sister. They are currently threatening my tellers with a corporate complaint if I do not release the funds for a commercial lease deposit. They did not steal from a faceless corporation. They stole from me. Do not lift the freeze, I said. Do not indicate that you have spoken to me. I am leaving my house now. I did not call my parents to scream. I did not text my sister to demand an explanation. Noise and hysteria are what guilty people rely on to muddy the waters. I rely on paper. I walked directly to my home office safe, extracted my physical passport, my original Social Security card, and my driver's license and sealed them inside a rigid plastic document folder. The drive downtown took 18 minutes. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, then watching the gray morning traffic blur past the windshield. Panic is a luxury reserved for people who have safety nets. I only had a paper trail. When I pulled into the First Meridian parking lot, I spotted their vehicles instantly. My father's heavy luxury sedan and my sister's sport utility vehicle were occupying the premium visitor spaces nearest the glass entrance. I walked through the heavy double doors just as the armed guard was unlocking the main teller gates. The polished marble floors amplified the sound of my heels, but my eyes locked immediately on the waiting area outside the branch director's office. There they were. My mother, Beatrice, was seated on a leather sofa, casually reading a financial magazine as if she were waiting for a spa treatment. My father, Richard, was pacing in front of David's frosted glass door and checking his heavy silver watch with an expression of manufactured corporate irritation. And my younger sister, Chloe, stood by the coffee station. She was wrapped in a pristine, tailored vicuña wool coat that still carried the stiff drape of a freshly unboxed purchase. A structured designer handbag sat on the marble table next to her, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. They were wearing my credit score. Beatrice saw me first. She did not flinch. Her face instantly arranged itself into a mask of weary, maternal patience, the exact expression she used whenever she needed an audience to believe I was the problem. She stood up smoothly, smoothing the front of her silk blouse. "Sloan, darling." Beatrice sighed, pitching her voice loud enough so the two tellers organizing their cash drawers could hear her clearly. There is absolutely no need for you to be here making a scene. David should not have disturbed your morning. Chloe's interior design firm hit a minor cash flow hurdle, and the commercial lenders were being completely unreasonable. She deserves help, not you. You already have a successful career and a beautiful home. I stopped walking. I did not raise my voice to match her theater. I looked at the $5,000 coat on my sister's shoulders, then back at my mother. The sheer, suffocating audacity of her tone hung in the sterile air of the lobby. She had just admitted to a federal felony in the tone of a woman, explaining why she borrowed a kitchen appliance. Richard did not even stand up straight. He leaned against the glass partition and let out an exhausted breath. "Let us not turn this into a legal production, Sloan. But we secured a bridge loan using your profile. We will cover the minimums until Chloe's business turns a profit. You will figure it out in the meantime. You always do. Now go in there and authorize the release so we can get on with our day." Chloe finally looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes as if my presence was an inconvenience. "Honestly, your credit utilization was basically zero. It is not like you were using it. I do not know why you are being so territorial." They actually believed that sharing a bloodline granted them immunity from the federal penal code. They believed the bank was just another living room where they could manipulate the narrative until I simply surrendered to keep the peace. The frosted glass door opened. David Sterling stood in the threshold, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression strictly procedural. And he looked at my parents, then locked eyes with me. "Sloan," David said, "please come in." I walked past my father without a single word and stepped into the office. As I moved toward the chair opposite his heavy oak desk, Beatrice tried to slip through the doorway behind me, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile. "I need to be in this meeting," Beatrice announced, placing a manicured hand flat against the doorframe. "I am managing this transaction and my daughter is clearly confused about our family arrangement." David did not blink. He placed his own hand against the glass edge. "Ma'am, you are not the primary account holder. If you cross this threshold, I will have the armed guard remove you from the premises." Beatrice's jaw dropped. For the first time all morning, the arrogant mask slipped. She took a step back, and David pulled the heavy door shut, locking it with a sharp, definitive click. The silence inside the office was absolute. David walked around his desk. He did not offer apologies or customer service platitudes. He tapped his spacebar, waking up his dual monitors. "I have the original digital application file open right here," David said, his voice dropping to a low, serious murmur. "It was submitted online exactly 22 days ago. Because your existing corporate checking history with First Meridian is flawless, the system utilized an override code generated from a recognized profile match." I unzipped my rigid plastic folder and placed my passport and driver's license flat on the polished wood. "I want to see exactly how they bypassed the two-factor authentication," I said. David angled his right monitor slightly toward me, and the screen displayed a dense gray grid of application fields, internet protocol timestamps, and contact data. "When our fraud department flagged the commercial wire transfer last night, they attempted to call the primary account holder to verify the transaction," David said. "But they did not reach you?" I looked at the screen. The name at the top of the application was mine. The social security number was mine. The date of birth was mine. But the contact information was not. David scrolled down to the primary contact section. He did not point. He just let the raw data speak for itself. He turned the screen toward me and asked, "Why is your mother's phone number listed as yours?" I stared at the 10 digits glowing on the monitor. It was not a typo. It was the architecture of a trap. They had not just borrowed my name, but they had routed all the bank's security codes directly to my mother's pocket, ensuring my phone would never ring during the approval process. Because, I said calmly, she needed to intercept the approval texts. David's jaw tightened. He clicked a secondary tab labeled Identity Verification. If she changed the contact number during the application process to bypass the freeze, David murmured, typing rapidly, the system algorithm would have mandated a secondary visual verification, a piece of government-issued photo identification to prove you authorized the data change. He hit enter. A high-resolution scanned image loaded onto the center of his screen. David stared at it for 3 full seconds. The rigid posture of a veteran bank manager dissolved as he realized exactly how deep the fraud went, and exactly what my family had submitted to a federally insured institution. He looked at the uploaded image, then looked down at the physical, legitimate driver's license I had just placed on his desk. He turned the monitor another inch toward me, exposing the scanned document. "Sloan," he whispered. "Look at the address and the signature on this uploaded ID." I leaned forward. The face on the screen was mine, pulled from an old photograph. But the address listed was not my home. It was the exact street address of my father's architectural firm. And the signature at the bottom was not a careful forgery of my handwriting. "That is my mother's signature," I said, my voice completely flat. She had not even attempted to practice forging my name. Beatrice was so insulated by her own arrogance, I so utterly convinced that the digital systems of the world existed merely to facilitate her convenience, that she had simply signed her own name on a fabricated state identification card bearing my photograph. David Sterling leaned back in his heavy oak chair. The accommodating, polished demeanor of a branch director evaporated instantly. He was now a banking professional, looking at a massive compliance breach executed within his institution. This elevates the situation from unauthorized family use to synthetic identity theft and federal wire fraud, David murmured, his eyes staying locked on the high-resolution scan. Because your historical data with First Meridian is flawless, the algorithm trusted the initial application, but the address discrepancy triggered a secondary verification protocol. That is why they needed to upload the ID. "And the phone number?" I asked, keeping my hands perfectly still on the edge of the desk. Once the system accepted the fake ID, it allowed the applicant to update the primary contact number directly to Beatrice's cell phone, David explained. His fingers flew across his keyboard, opening the back-end audit log. She intercepted the two-factor authentication SMS codes. She authorized the new signature tier card and approved expedited shipping directly to your father's architectural firm suite. You were completely locked out of the paper trail from day one. I did not ask how my own family could betray me. I did not cry. I unzipped the rigid plastic folder I had brought from my home safe, pulled out a leather-bound notebook, and clicked my pen. Undocumentation is the only armor that matters when dealing with people who rewrite history to cast themselves as victims. "Show me the ledger, David," I said cleanly. "I want to see exactly how they managed to max out a $100,000 limit in 22 days. He clicked a tab labeled Transaction History. A cascading list of expenditures populated his second monitor in brutal, unapologetic red font. I read the lines with cold precision. $14,000 at a boutique interior design showroom, $9,000 at a luxury electronics retailer, $6,000 at a high-end day spa. I thought of Chloe standing in the lobby, swathed in her pristine vicuña wool coat, a structured designer handbag resting on the marble table beside her. And they had not stolen my identity to survive a medical emergency or a sudden eviction. They had stolen it to fund a delusion of grandeur. But the final line item, glowing in bright yellow at the very top of the screen, was the reason they were sitting in the lobby at 7 in the morning. Status: hold, pending fraud review. Amount: $45,000. Type: Wire transfer. Where was that wire going, David? I asked, my pen hovering over the notebook paper. He clicked the routing details. A new panel opened, displaying the beneficiary institution and the receiving account name. The destination is a commercial holding account at Coastal Fidelity, David read, his tone turning clinical. The beneficiary name is Chloe Vanguard Interiors, LLC. My sister's brand new, non-existent interior design business, and the one my mother had loudly claimed hit a minor cash flow hurdle. Chloe had not just bought a luxury coat. She was funding her entire startup with my credit score, funneling the cash straight through my father's commercial address. They drained $55,000 on retail and vendor deposits, David explained, pointing to the screen. And late last night, they attempted to wire the remaining $45,000 directly into Chloe's LLC to secure a commercial lease. Because the wire amount was massive and the routing destination had zero prior association with your financial history, our algorithm hard froze the account. They had not driven here at dawn to apologize or explain a mistake, and they came to bully the branch manager into overriding the security freeze so they could finish stealing the rest of my limit before the fraud department could reach my actual phone number. David, I said calmly, print the transaction ledger. Print the application metadata showing the Internet Protocol address used to submit the file. Print the high-resolution scan of the fabricated ID. He paused for a fraction of a second. Sloan, providing the complete internal fraud audit file directly to a client formalizes the claim. The bank will be legally obligated to initiate an internal investigation immediately, and we must report the fabricated ID to federal authorities. There is no unwinding this once I hit print. I am not asking to unwind it, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. I am the victim of identity theft. I print the logs. David nodded once. The heavy, industrial laser printer in the corner of his office hummed to life. The sound of crisp paper sliding into the output tray was the sound of a trap snapping shut. He collated the documents, stapled them in the top left corner, and slid a thick manila envelope across his oak desk. The supplementary cards they are holding in the lobby are permanently deactivated, David stated officially. The $45,000 wire is canceled. The account is locked in an active fraud status. I placed the envelope into my bag. I will handle the lobby. I stood up, adjusting my tailored blazer. I did not storm out. I opened the heavy glass door of his office with a smooth, controlled motion and stepped back into the harsh fluorescent light of the waiting area. And Beatrice immediately stood up from the leather sofa, smoothing her silk blouse with a triumphant, patronizing smile. Richard checked his heavy silver watch and crossed his arms, ready to accept the victory. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, looking profoundly bored. Finally, Beatrice sighed loudly, ensuring the two tellers behind the counter could hear her every word. I assume David cleared the hold? Chloe has an appointment with the leasing agent in an hour, Sloan. We do not have time for your theatrics. Richard stepped forward, projecting the impatient authority of a man who believed the rules of society bent to his convenience. Sign the release, Sloan. We will draft a repayment schedule this weekend. You are embarrassing the family over a simple bridge loan. Chloe clutched her expensive handbag closer to her wool coat. Oh, seriously, it is just credit. You have plenty of liquidity. You act like we stole your kidney. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not ask them how they could betray me. I looked directly at my sister, my voice carrying cleanly across the silent, polished marble of the bank lobby. There is no bridge loan, I said, my tone as flat and heavy as a vault door. The account is frozen permanently. The $45,000 wire to your LLC has been canceled. The $55,000 in retail charges are being flagged as federal wire fraud. Beatrice's practiced smile shattered instantly. Her eyes widened, and a sharp, jagged edge of genuine panic finally cracked through her arrogant facade. You cannot do that, Beatrice hissed, stepping closer, dropping the volume of her voice to an aggressive, frantic whisper. You will ruin your sister's launch. We signed the commercial lease. If that wire does not clear today, Chloe is in breach of contract. I did not authorize the application, Beatrice, I replied, deliberately refusing to call her mom. I did not authorize you to upload a fake state ID with my face and Richard's architectural office address. I did not give you permission to wire funds to Chloe's LLC. Richard's face darkened into a flush of deep red. He stepped directly into my personal space, attempting to use his physical size to intimidate me, a tactic that was utterly useless against a paper trail. Listen to me very carefully, Sloan, Richard warned, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You are going to walk back into that office and fix this. You are not going to destroy this family over paperwork. It is not paperwork, I replied coldly. It is a felony. I opened my folder just enough to pull out the top sheet of paper David had printed. I held it up, keeping it perfectly flat and visible in the sterile light. This is the application metadata, I said, listing the facts like I was reading a grocery list. It proves the forged ID was uploaded from an internet protocol address registered to your architectural firm. And the routing details prove the wire was not going to a commercial landlord. It was going directly into Chloe's personal account. The color drained from Richard's face so fast he looked physically ill. He stared at the printed audit log as if it were a live explosive. Beatrice stopped breathing. She grabbed Richard's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. Chloe took a sudden, involuntary step backward, the vicuña coat suddenly looking heavy on her shoulders. Dad? Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. What is she talking about? You said you had her permission. Richard did not back down. Instead, his eyes narrowed, and the panic in his posture was replaced by a cold, calculating certainty. He realized the bank manager would not bend, and the credit card was dead. So he pivoted to his backup plan. He reached inside his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a folded document printed on heavy legal stock. You think you can just shut us down? Richard said, his voice dropping so only I could hear it. We anticipated you might be uncooperative, Sloan. You have a very demanding corporate job. You have been so stressed lately. He unfolded the document and held it up just enough for me to read the bold heading at the top. Limited durable power of attorney. We did not just open a credit card, Richard whispered, a cruel smile touching the corners of his mouth. You signed this last month, granting me full financial proxy to manage your assets in the event of your incapacity, and we have a notary stamp to prove it. I did not blink. My mind simply accelerated. They had not just stolen a credit line, they had manufactured a legal mechanism to hijack my entire financial existence. I looked at the document. I recognized the notary stamp immediately, and then my phone buzzed with an automated alert from my primary investment brokerage. The vibration against my palm was a single, sustained pulse, and I did not break eye contact with my father as I tilted my phone screen upward, just enough to read the notification banner, glowing stark white against the dark background. Security alert. Horizon Institutional Wealth. Urgent. Request to liquidate $250,000 from primary investment portfolio received. Pending power of attorney document verification. Richard's cruel, confident smile widened by a fraction of an inch. He had timed the assault perfectly. While my mother and sister were running a loud distraction at First Meridian for $45,000 on a fraudulent credit card, my father had faxed his fabricated legal proxy directly to my brokerage to drain $250,000 of my life savings. He thought it was a brilliant checkmate. He thought the sheer, unintimidating weight of a notarized document would crush me into panicked compliance. He expected me to surrender the bank funds just to save my primary investments. Beatrice instantly recognized that Richard had played his trump card, and she seamlessly shifted tactics. She slipped from arrogant entitlement into the role of a deeply concerned, long-suffering matriarch dealing with a volatile child. She looked past me to the two bank tellers standing behind the plexiglass counter, her eyes welling with manufactured theatrical tears. I am so incredibly sorry you have to witness this, Beatrice said to the staff, her voice trembling with perfect, practiced pity. Sloan has been under immense psychiatric distress at her corporate firm. We had to step in and assume legal guardianship of her finances for her own protection. She is simply confused and lashing out. We are just trying to get her the medical care she desperately needs. It was a terrifyingly effective strategy of manipulation. If I screamed at her, if I cried, if I tried to physically snatch the heavy legal paper from his hands to tear it up, I would instantly validate her narrative. I would look exactly like the unstable, erratic daughter throwing a public tantrum in a bank lobby, and they would look exactly like the weary, responsible custodians trying to protect me from myself. So I did not give them a show, I gave them procedure. "May I inspect the document, Richard?" I asked, my voice polite, even, and entirely devoid of any recognizable emotion. Richard hesitated. He was deeply suspicious of my calm, but his monumental ego ultimately won. He wanted me to read the exact terms of my own defeat in black and white ink. He kept a firm, white-knuckled grip on the top corner of the heavy legal stock and held it out for me to inspect under the harsh fluorescent lights. I did not try to grab it. I just let my eyes scan the dense, boilerplate text. It was a standard durable power of attorney, legally granting Richard sweeping absolute authority over my real estate holdings, bank accounts, and investment portfolios. But I was not reading the financial liability clauses. I was looking for the execution block at the very bottom of the second page. There was my forged signature. Beside it was the date of execution, October 14th. And directly below that was the raised blue ink seal of the notary public who had sworn under penalty of perjury that I had physically stood before them to sign away my financial autonomy. Evelyn Vance. Commission expires 2029, State of Illinois. Evelyn Vance, I read aloud, ensuring my voice carried cleanly and sharply across the quiet, marble lobby. The senior commercial escrow manager at your architectural firm, Richard. That is your own employee's official state stamp. Evelyn is a fully licensed, bonded notary public. Richard snapped, crossing his arms, instantly defensive but attempting to remain fundamentally unbothered. She officially witnessed your signature. The document is perfectly legal, Sloan. Now tell David to lift the security freeze on Chloe's business wire transfer, or I will fax this proxy directly to your corporate human resources department and officially inform them of your sudden mental breakdown. A legal document is only valid if the principal actually signs it in the physical presence of the notary, I replied, unzipping the rigid plastic folder I had carried from my home safe. And since I have not stepped foot inside your architectural firm in over 2 years, Evelyn just committed federal notary fraud to help you execute a financial crime. Chloe let out a sharp, panicked breath, clutching her structured designer handbag tightly against her expensive vicuña wool coat. "Dad," she hissed, her eyes darting frantically between us. "What is she doing?" "I am checking the exact date Evelyn stamped on this forgery," I said. "I'm pointing directly to the line beneath the blue seal without touching the paper." "October 14th? Exactly 3 weeks ago." Beatrice rolled her eyes, leaning heavily against the branch director's frosted glass door. "Yes, Sloan, October 14th. The day you finally came to the office crying and agreed to let your father help you manage your overwhelming, stressful portfolio. What exactly is your point?" I did not answer her directly. I reached deep into my rigid plastic folder, bypassed my bank statements entirely, and pulled out my physical navy blue United States passport. I opened it to the middle pages, laid it completely flat on the small marble table in the waiting area, and tapped the bright, undeniable ink of an international customs stamp directly next to their forged legal document. "My point, Beatrice," I said, on looking her dead in the eye, "is that on October 14th, I was physically standing in Geneva for a global supply chain summit. I departed the country on the 12th and returned on the 18th. Here is the entry stamp from Geneva Airport. Here is the exit stamp. And underneath this passport is the corporate flight manifest." The silence that fell over the First Meridian lobby was absolute, dense, and suffocating. The tellers stopped typing entirely, their hands hovering frozen over their keyboards. The armed security guard near the entrance stopped shifting his weight. Richard stared down at the passport ink. The color drained from his face in a rapid, highly visible wave. The arrogant, bulldozing patriarch vanished into thin air. I replaced instantly by a man realizing he had just anchored a federal felony to a Tuesday I spent nearly 4,000 miles away on another continent. Beatrice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her condescending, maternal mask completely dissolved, leaving only raw, unfiltered terror. She looked at the passport ink, then at the forged document still in Richard's hand, her mind frantically trying to construct a new lie, fast enough to bridge the impossible gap in her narrative. "You could not have been in Geneva," Chloe stammered, her voice suddenly high, reedy, and devoid of any entitlement. You told Mom you were working from home that entire week." "I told Beatrice I was unavailable," I corrected cleanly, my eyes never leaving Richard's pale face. "Because I knew she would ask me for money to fund your fake business. I did not tell her where I was physically located." A notary public officially verifying the signature of a person who is documented by federal border control to be on another continent is not a simple clerical error, Richard, I stated clearly, my voice ringing out. It is a conspiracy to commit fraud. It carries severe federal prison penalties. And it immediately and permanently revokes the commission of the employee who stamped it. I did not give them a single moment to regroup or strategize. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket, opened my encrypted email application, and drafted a new message. I typed in the direct address for the State Notary Commission's Fraud Division. I carbon copied my personal attorney and the institutional fraud department of my Horizon brokerage account. "What are you doing?" Richard demanded, his voice dropping into a desperate, reedy panic as he realized he had lost absolute control of the room. "I am executing a surgical strike," I replied smoothly, my thumbs flying across the digital keyboard without breaking rhythm. "I am attaching a high-resolution photograph of your forged document and the application metadata David printed, showing the Internet Protocol trace leading directly back to your office. I am officially reporting Evelyn Vance for notary fraud, and I am reporting you for attempted asset theft." I hit send. Richard's chest heaved. "You reported Evelyn. She will lose her commission. She will be indicted." "Yes," I agreed calmly, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "And when the state investigators seize her physical notary journal, they will find that my signature is entirely missing from the October 14th entry because I was not there. And when Evelyn realizes she is facing felony fraud charges and federal prison time, she is not going to protect your architectural firm. She is going to tell the investigators exactly who ordered her to apply that stamp to a forged document." Richard opened his mouth to speak, but the heavy frosted glass door of the manager's office clicked open sharply behind us. David Sterling stepped out into the lobby. He had not just been hiding behind his desk. He had been watching the entire exchange through the glass, listening to Richard verbally admit his intent to extort me with the paperwork in front of witnesses. "David," Richard stammered, frantically trying to fold the forged power of attorney back into his tailored suit jacket. This is a private family matter. We are leaving the premises immediately." "You are not leaving with that document," David replied, his tone icy, authoritative, and unyielding, stepping smoothly into Richard's path to block the exit. "It is now physical evidence in an active bank fraud inquiry. Hand it to me immediately, or I will instruct my armed guard to lock the exterior doors and call local dispatch." Beatrice gasped, her manicured hand flying to her chest. Chloe shrank back against the coffee station, her eyes darting frantically toward the glass exit doors. Richard froze. If he handed the paper over, the bank would officially log the forgery into evidence. If he refused, he looked exactly like a criminal attempting to destroy proof in front of witnesses. He shoved the heavy legal stock into David's waiting hands, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle visibly twitched in his cheek. David did not even look at the paper. He held his desk phone receiver in his other hand. He locked eyes with me, then looked directly at my father. Sloan, David said, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. Your brokerage just called my direct branch line. They received your email and the photographic evidence of your physical absence during the notarization. Beatrice let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp, realizing the walls were closing in from multiple institutions simultaneously. David lowered the phone. They are not just locking your investment portfolio, Sloan, he announced, his eyes fixed firmly on Richard. Horizon's compliance team just triggered a multi-institution federal fraud alert, and they are dispatching federal authorities to this branch right now. The words federal authorities hung in the sterile, conditioned air of the First Meridian lobby like a physical weight. The ambient, polite hum of the building seemed to stop entirely. The two tellers standing behind the reinforced plexiglass slowly lowered their hands from their keyboards, exchanging a wide-eyed, silent glance before quietly stepping back from their cash stations. The armed security guard stationed by the entrance did not draw his weapon, but he subtly shifted his stance, moving to stand squarely in the exact center of the double-glass exit doors. Richard's face underwent a catastrophic, irreversible transformation. The calculating architect who had just attempted to extort $250,000 from his own daughter completely evaporated, while he looked at the heavy glass doors, then at the armed guard, and finally at David Sterling. "David, you need to call them back," Richard stammered, his voice cracking, entirely stripped of its usual booming boardroom authority. "You need to call Horizon right now and tell them this was a massive miscommunication. Tell them the primary account holder is present and the legal proxy was submitted in error." "I do not work for your brokerage, Richard," David replied, his voice a flat, uncompromising line of institutional protocol. "And I cannot call off a federal response for a felony committed within my branch. I have already locked the forged power of attorney inside my desk, and the digital application file containing the fabricated state identification is secured in our fraud queue. The timeline is out of my hands." Beatrice let out a sharp, ragged gasp. Her meticulously crafted persona of the patient, long-suffering mother shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She stumbled backward, her designer heels catching awkwardly on the polished marble floor until she collided heavily with the leather-weighting sofa. "Richard, do something!" Beatrice hissed, her voice vibrating with raw, unfiltered panic. She grabbed his arm, her manicured nails digging fiercely into the expensive fabric of his tailored suit. "Tell him to delete the application file. We did not actually take the wire. The money is still in the bank. It is a victimless mistake." "A victimless mistake?" I repeated, my voice slicing through her rising hysteria with surgical precision. You intercepted $55,000 of my credit capacity to fund luxury retail purchases. You fabricated a government identification card with my face on it. You conspired with your employee to commit notary fraud, and you attempted to liquidate my primary investment portfolio. The fact that the system caught you does not mean you are innocent, Beatrice. It simply means you are mathematically incompetent." Chloe was physically trembling. The pristine, camel-colored vicuña wool coat suddenly looked absurdly heavy on her narrow shoulders, a luxury costume she had stolen but could not afford to wear. She looked at the structured designer handbag sitting on the marble table, then looked at me, her eyes wide with a sudden, horrifying realization of her own exposure. "Sloan," Chloe whispered, her voice reedy, thin, and devoid of her usual entitlement. "Sloan, please. I did not sign any of the applications. I just wanted to start my business. Mom and Dad told me they had a private arrangement with you. They said you were a silent partner in the LLC. I did not know they faked your signature." "You knew I was not a silent partner," I replied coldly, crossing my arms. "You knew because I explicitly told you at Thanksgiving that I would not fund an interior design firm for someone who has never balanced a basic spreadsheet. You did not ask questions because you wanted the coat, the bag, and the commercial lease more than you wanted the truth." Richard forcefully pulled his arm out of Beatrice's frantic grip. His chest was heaving, his heavy silver watch catching the harsh fluorescent light as his hands began to shake uncontrollably. He looked toward the exit again, his eyes darting wildly as he calculated his diminishing odds of escape. "We are leaving," Richard announced, his voice raising an octave in sheer desperation. He grabbed Beatrice by the elbow and gestured wildly at Chloe. "Get your bag, Chloe. We are walking out of this building right now. They cannot legally hold us here without a formal warrant." Richard took 2 fast, aggressive steps toward the glass exit doors. He did not make it to a third. The armed security guard raised one thick, gloved hand, stepping perfectly into the center of the pathway, blocking the electronic sensors so the doors would not slide open. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to remain exactly where you are," the guard stated, his voice entirely devoid of any customer service warmth. "The branch director has initiated a hard lockdown protocol pending law enforcement arrival." "Get out of my way," Richard snapped, trying desperately to project the dominance of a wealthy executive used to commanding service workers. "You are a private security guard. You do not have the legal authority to detain me. I have the explicit authority to secure the perimeter of a federally insured financial institution during an active verified fraud event," the guard replied, his hand resting casually but deliberately near his utility belt. "If you attempt to physically bypass this door, I will be forced to restrain you until the authorities arrive." Richard stopped dead in his tracks. The reality of the physical boundary finally broke him. He was not in a boardroom where he could dictate terms. He was in a cage of his own making, surrounded by an irrefutable paper trail. He spun around to face me, his face slick with a cold, pale sweat. "Sloan," he pleaded, dropping the volume of his voice, trying to inject it with a desperate paternal warmth that made my skin crawl. "Sloan, please. If the federal authorities walk through those doors, my architectural firm is completely finished. My professional licenses will be permanently revoked. Beatrice and I could go to federal prison. You are our daughter. You cannot let them do this to us." I did not blink. I did not soften my posture. I looked at the man who had just tried to strip my entire financial existence down to the studs while looking me in the eye. "I am not letting them do anything to you, Richard," I said, my tone as flat and unyielding as the marble beneath our feet. "I simply provided my correct contact number and my physical passport. You did all the rest." Beatrice buried her face in her hands, letting out a loud, theatrical sob that echoed off the high ceilings. But there was no audience left to manipulate. The tellers were watching her with quiet, unmasked disgust. David Sterling stood by his office door, his arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. "Sloan, please," Chloe begged, tears finally spilling over her mascara, realizing her proximity to the crime scene was going to drag her down with them. "Tell them it was a massive misunderstanding. Tell them we had your verbal permission." "No," I said cleanly. Through the heavy glass windows of the First Meridian lobby, the flashing red and blue lights silently reflected off the gray morning traffic. Too dark. An unmarked sports utility vehicles pulled sharply into the parking lot, aggressively boxing in Richard's luxury sedan and Chloe's SUV. 4 individuals stepped out of the vehicles, 2 uniformed city police officers, and 2 plainclothes detectives wearing tactical vests emblazoned with the Financial Crimes Task Force insignia. The lead detective walked purposefully toward the entrance, holding a gold shield up to the reinforced glass and locking eyes directly with the security guard. The guard nodded, stepping back to manually override the electronic lock. The moment the heavy glass door slid open, the ambient noise of the city spilled into the silent lobby. The lead detective stepped inside, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. He bypassed my trembling family entirely, moving straight toward David and me, his eyes landing on the open, navy blue passport resting on the marble table. The lead detective did not ask the tellers who was causing a public disturbance. He stopped at the small marble table, his eyes shifting from my open passport to the thick manila envelope and the forged power of attorney in David Sterling's hands. Richard's survival instinct kicked in immediately. He abandoned his desperate, cornered posture and rushed toward the detective, instantly adopting the smooth, persuasive tone of a concerned, wealthy patriarch attempting to manage a service error. "Detective, thank goodness you have arrived," Richard said, his hands raised in a gesture of practiced diplomacy, forcing a tight, anxious smile. "This is a terrible, escalating family misunderstanding. My daughter Sloane has been dealing with severe psychiatric distress. We merely secured a temporary line of credit and a legal proxy to ensure her assets are protected while she seeks inpatient treatment. She is paranoid and lashing out at her mother and me." The detective did not shake Richard's extended hand. He did not even look at him. He looked directly at the branch director. "I am Detective Russo, Financial Crimes Task Force," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly hum that demanded total, immediate compliance in the room. "We received an automated priority escalation from Horizon Institutional Wealth, corroborated by a direct digital fraud report filed from this specific branch." "I am David Sterling, branch director," David replied, his voice echoing with cold, institutional authority. "The man currently speaking to you just presented a forged power of attorney to attempt to bypass a hard fraud freeze. The envelope in my hand contains the digital metadata proving his wife uploaded a fabricated state identification card to open a $100,000 credit line under the victim's social security number. The internet protocol address used for the application traces directly back to his commercial architectural firm. Furthermore, he just used the forged legal proxy to attempt a $250,000 asset liquidation at the Horizon brokerage." Richard's mouth opened, but the smooth, diplomatic words died in his throat. A sickly, pale gray washed over his face. I stepped forward. I did not raise my voice to compete with my father's lies. I simply tapped my open, navy blue passport. "Hi, my name is Sloane," I said calmly. "The power of attorney my father is holding claims I signed it in his architectural office on October 14th, officially verified by his employee's state notary stamp. The entry and exit stamps in this physical passport prove I was located in Geneva, Switzerland, from the 12th to the 18th for a corporate summit." Detective Russo looked down at the dark passport ink. He looked at the raised blue notary seal on the heavy legal stock. He did not need a tearful confession or a dramatic breakdown. He had a mathematical, geographical impossibility. He turned his attention back to Richard. "Sir," the detective said, his tone devoid of any sympathy, "a family dispute is an argument over a holiday dinner. A notarized forgery used to attempt a $250,000 institutional liquidation across state lines is a Class 2 federal felony." Beatrice let out a piercing, breathless gasp. The condescending matriarch who had told me I deserved absolutely nothing completely dissolved into sheer terror. "We did not actually take anything," she shrieked, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me, tears ruining her expensive makeup. "The massive wire transfer did not even go through. No one lost any actual money. You cannot arrest us for trying to secure a commercial lease to help our own daughter." "Ma'am," Russo replied, smoothly unholstering a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. You successfully defrauded a federally insured institution for $55,000 in luxury retail charges using a fake government ID bearing your signature. The fact that the bank caught your second, larger attempt does not legally erase the first." The lobby fell dead silent as the cold metal cuffs clicked sharply around Beatrice's wrists. She did not fight. Her knees simply buckled, and one of the uniformed officers had to physically hold her upright by her elbows. Her tailored silk blouse wrinkled instantly, her perfect, arrogant mask completely destroyed in front of the banking staff she had just insulted. Richard took half a step backward, slick with a cold sweat. "I am a prominent commercial architect," he stammered, looking at the officers like they had forgotten their place in society. "I demand the immediate right to call my corporate attorney." "You will have plenty of time to call your counsel from the holding cell," Russo said, gesturing cleanly for the second officer to detain him. The mechanical ratcheting sound of the steel cuffs echoing off the high marble ceilings was the most definitive sound I had ever heard. As they placed Richard in handcuffs, Chloe finally broke completely. She stood frozen by the leather armchair, clutching her pristine designer handbag against her vicuña coat. "Mom? Dad?" she whispered, her voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic sob. "What about my commercial lease? The landlord needs the deposit today. My entire interior design business." I looked at my younger sister taking in the luxury outfit bought entirely with my stolen credit score. "Your LLC is dead, Chloe," I said, as my voice perfectly level. "The $45,000 wire is permanently canceled, and the designer bag you are currently holding is now officially classified as stolen merchandise purchased with fraudulent funds. I strongly suggest you hand it over to the officers right now before they formally charge you with possession of stolen property." Chloe stared at me, her eyes wide with absolute terror. With shaking, manicured hands, she dropped the heavy, expensive bag onto the marble floor like it was on fire. She was not arrested on the spot, but she was left standing entirely alone in the lobby, her fake business empire reduced to nothing but an empty coat. I watched the police actively escort my parents out the heavy glass doors and into the gray morning light. I did not feel a sudden, emotional rush of triumphant joy, and I just felt the quiet, steady relief of a closed system functioning exactly as designed. David turned to me. "The signature credit line is officially dissolved from your social security number," he confirmed, walking back to his terminal. "The $55,000 in retail charges are now First Meridian's internal fraud loss, which our legal team will aggressively pursue directly against your parents for maximum restitution. You owe absolutely nothing, Sloan. Horizon's compliance team also verified your portfolio is securely locked under a secondary biometric protocol. They did not touch a single cent of your actual liquidity." I nodded once, zipped my passport and documents safely back into my rigid plastic folder, and walked out of the bank. 3 weeks later, the paper trail finalized their absolute ruin. The State Notary Commission permanently revoked Evelyn Vance's license. Facing severe felony fraud charges in federal prison, Evelyn immediately flipped, providing state investigators with internal, time-stamped emails proving Richard had explicitly ordered her to stamp the forged proxy under direct threat of termination while I was out of the country. Richard's architectural firm was hit with a massive, multi-agency compliance audit, and his state operating license was indefinitely suspended pending a criminal trial. He and Beatrice were formally indicted on multiple felony counts of wire fraud, synthetic identity theft, and conspiracy. The aggressive legal retainer required to keep them out of pretrial detention completely drained their personal savings and forced them to mortgage their home. And Chloe's commercial landlord broke her lease the exact moment the fraud investigation became public in the local business journals. Without my credit score to prop up her massive ego, she was forced to abandon her luxury retail dreams, liquidate her SUV, and take a junior administrative job answering phones just to pay her own exorbitant legal fees. I filed a permanent, ironclad restraining order against my entire family, and a judge granted it without hesitation after reading the official police report and the bank's digital metadata file. They thought they could use the banking system to erase me and hijack my financial future, but the system only responds to irrefutable proof. And my proof was bulletproof. If your own parents forged a legal document to steal your life savings and fund your siblings' fake business, would you have pressed federal charges, or would you have let them walk away to keep the peace? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of absolute paper trail justice, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.